Hey everyone, ready for some serious political drama?
Always.
Well, today we're taking you straight to Georgia, where things are, let's just say, about to boil over.
Yeah, things are pretty tense over there right now.
Protests, disputed elections, the whole nine yards.
Oh, yeah. And a power struggle that's got both Russia and the
Okay.
EU watching very, very closely.
This deep dive is based on some pretty intense breaking news from France 24.
So we're talking about a situation that's literally changing by the minute.
Exactly.
What I find fascinating is that Georgia's caught in this geopolitical tug of war.
Right.
It's like they're trying to, I don't know, walk a tightrope between Russia, this powerful neighbor, with a history of, well, intervention, shall we say.
Yeah.
Intervention in the European Union, which represents, well, for a lot of people at least, this beacon of democracy and opportunity.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit.
Yeah, let's go back to the beginning.
Back to the start of this whole political drama.
The spark that lit the fuse.
Exactly. So the parliamentary elections in Georgia, they were held back on October 26th.
Right.
And the Georgian Dream Party, the ruling party, they came out on top.
Seemingly, at least.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there?
There's always a twist.
The pro-European opposition, they're claiming that the whole thing was rigged.
Yeah, and it's not just, the sore losers.
Right.
International election monitors have actually reported some pretty serious irregularities,
Oh, wow.
which are throwing a huge shadow over the whole thing.
I bet. So imagine you're in Georgia, you've been following these elections, you believe in a future that's aligned with the EU, democratic values, moving away from that Russian influence.
Yeah, all of that.
And then, bam, this election result just feels like...
Yeah, like a punch to the gut.
Totally. So it's no wonder people are taking to the streets.
I mean, can you blame them?
Not at all. But here's where things get even spicier.
Oh, there's more.
Always. Georgia's president, Salome Zurabishvili,
Right?
she is refusing to accept the results. Seriously.
Dead serious.
Wow.
President Zurabishvili, she's known for her pro-EU stance.
I see.
She's gone so far as to ask the Constitutional Court to, get this, annul the election results completely.
Whoa, that's a bold move.
Isn't it?
Definitely a power move.
And she's even gone on to call the newly formed government, wait for it, illegitimate.
So basically she's saying, nope, not playing this game.
Exactly. And then just as tensions were, reaching a boiling point,
As if things couldn't get any worse.
Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze.
A key figure in the Georgian Dream Party, right?
Yep, he drops a bombshell. Georgia, he says, won't be seeking EU accession talks until 2028.
2028.
You've heard that right, 2028.
So basically kicking that can way, way down the road.
Pretty much.
I can imagine the pro-EU Georgians were not thrilled.
You think it was like someone dumped gasoline on an already raging fire?
Oh, yeah.
The disputed elections, okay, that was bad enough.
Right. That was enough to get people riled up.
But then this delay, it felt like, I don't know, like a slap in the face.
Exactly. Like a deliberate screw you to anyone hoping for closer ties with the EU.
It definitely added fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. And to make matters even worse,
Just keeps getting worse, huh?
Kobakidze's government then nominates Mikhail Kavalashvili,
Okay.
a former football star known for his, shall we say, far-right views,
Oh, boy.
for the largely ceremonial role of president.
Interesting choice.
Right.
So what message are they trying to send here?
I don't know, but it's making a lot of people question the Georgian Dream Party's commitment to, those democratic values they claim to uphold.
Doesn't really seem like they're walking the walk.
Not really. So you have all this frustration, all this anger over the elections,
Mhm.
and then Kobakidze makes these two decisions that, well, they seem to be pushing Georgia further away from the EU.
Right.
And President Zurabishvili,
What about her?
she's not having any of it.
Good for her.
She's like the symbol of defiance now.
I see.
A rallying point for, the pro-EU segment of society.
So what's she doing?
Well, she publicly stated, I will be the representative of this legitimate, stable transition.
Okay.
And she's even formed a national council that includes opposition groups and members of civil society.
So she's basically building her own power base.
It's a direct challenge to Kobakidze's government.
This is getting messy.
Oh, it is. Now, while all this is happening, we have constitutional experts pointing out a rather sticky legal situation.
Uh-oh. What's that?
Well, they're arguing that any decisions made by this new parliament, including Kobakidze's appointment as prime minister, could actually be invalid.
How is that possible?
It's complicated. Essentially, the parliament might have jumped the gun by approving their own credentials before the Constitutional Court had a chance to, rule on the president's request to nullify the election.
Oh, wow.
So it creates this legal limbo where it's not entirely clear if the current government is actually legitimate.
That's a pretty big deal.
It is. And this isn't just some abstract legal debate, It's having real-world consequences.
Of course.
Public servants, diplomats, even judges, they're all speaking out against Kobe-Kidzi's actions.
What are they saying?
They're warning about potential international isolation.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be worried about that.
Over 200 Georgian diplomats have actually issued statements criticizing the government's direction.
Wow.
They're expressing fears that this is a path toward, international isolation.
And that's a huge concern for a country like Georgia.
Absolutely.
A country that is, so strategically positioned and reliant on international partnerships.
Exactly. And this internal dissent, especially coming from, the diplomatic corps, it really shows how deeply concerned people are about the potential damage to Georgia's standing on the world stage.
I can only imagine. So just to recap.
Yeah, let's sum it up.
We've got these disputed elections,
Yeah.
EU aspirations on hold, a president who's basically refusing to play ball, a potential constitutional crisis bubbling under the surface, and the international community watching with growing concern.
It's a lot to unpack.
And we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah, there's so much more to this story.
Buckle up, folks. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive where we'll dive even deeper into this unfolding crisis in Georgia.
It's not all about geopolitics, though.
Right.
One of the most striking things about this whole situation is the level of, internal dissent within Georgia.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not just coming from, the opposition parties or the protesters. There's pushback from within the government itself.
Wow.
The judiciary, even diplomats are speaking out.
It's like the system itself is trying to, I don't know.
Course correct.
Yeah. Like you have these different visions for Georgia's future and they're clashing head on.
Yeah, absolutely.
On one side, there's this strong desire for closer ties with the EU, more democracy, a more transparent system, a future free from the,
That shadow of Russia.
Exactly. But on the other side, what do they want?
It's a complicated question.
I bet.
And to understand it, you really have to consider the historical context.
I see.
Georgia has this long history, being under the influence or even outright control of, empires and powers for centuries.
Right.
I mean, that leaves a mark.
Oh, for sure.
It shapes the national psyche.
Absolutely.
So when some people see the EU as this promise of freedom and prosperity, others, they see it as, I don't know, a potential loss of sovereignty.
Oh, interesting.
Another form of external influence.
So for some, aligning with Russia might actually feel like less of a step backward and more like, a return to something familiar.
Exactly.
Even if that familiarity,
comes with a lot of baggage.
Yeah, a lot of baggage.
And it doesn't help that the Georgian Dream Party,
right,
while denying any kind of pro-Russia agenda, they haven't exactly been clear about what their vision for the country actually is.
Right.
They talk about pragmatism.
Okay.
About balancing relations with both the West and Russia.
Right.
But their actions, like delaying the EU talks, they send a very different message.
They do. And nominating Kovalashvili, with his far-right views, for president, it doesn't exactly scream, we're a balanced, forward-thinking democracy, does it?
It does not.
So you have all this baggage, this mixed messaging coming from the government, a population that's deeply divided, and a president who's she's standing her ground.
She's holding strong.
What are the possible outcomes here? Like, what's next in this drama?
Well, there are a few different paths this could take.
Okay.
One possibility is that the current government just,
weathers the storm.
Yeah, the protests die down, the international pressure eases, and they continue to govern.
Right.
With a tarnished reputation, of course.
Yeah.
And a very, very fractured society.
That doesn't sound great.
Not ideal, no.
What else? What else could happen?
Another possibility is that President Zurabichvili manages to force new elections.
Okay.
If the Constitutional Court rules in her favor, and she can keep the support of the opposition and civil society, she might be able to, create the conditions for a fresh start.
That would be the more democratic solution, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But can she pull it off?
It would be a tough fight, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But her defiance, it's already galvanized a lot of people.
That's true.
She's become this symbol of hope for those who are disillusioned with the Georgian Dream Party. And don't forget, international pressure could play a role here.
Right.
The EU, Western countries, they can make it very clear.
How so?
They could say they won't recognize the legitimacy of this government unless there are new elections.
Okay, new elections. That's one possibility.
Yeah.
What are some of the other scenarios we should be considering?
Well, there's always a risk that things could,
Spiral.
spiral out of control.
If the government cracks down even more on the protests,
Right.
or the opposition feels like they're not being heard,
Yeah. Or the constitutional crisis deepens.
things could escalate pretty quickly, couldn't they?
Absolutely.
And of course, there's, we can't forget about
The elephant in the room.
Russia. They're watching all this very closely.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a history of, meddling in Georgian affairs.
It's like this unpredictable wild card.
Totally. So what do you think Russia's endgame is here? Do they want to see Georgia become like a puppet state?
It's tough to say for sure.
I bet.
Their goals are, well, they're often opaque,
Mhm.
even to their own people sometimes.
Yeah.
But what
also-
we do know is that they see Georgia as falling within their sphere of influence.
Right.
They don't like any moves towards NATO or the EU.
I see.
And they definitely wouldn't hesitate to exploit any instability to their own advantage.
So how would they do that?
It could be covert support for pro-Russian groups, or even, more direct military intervention.
Like what we saw in 2008.
Exactly.
Now I'm really nervous.
Yeah, it's a tense situation.
It feels like Georgia is caught between a rock and a hard place.
I mean, that's a good way to put it.
They're trying to assert their independence, choose their own path,
Mm.
but they're surrounded by these powerful forces pulling them in different directions.
It's a constant negotiation,
Yeah.
a balancing act.
So where do we go from here? What should we be watching for as this whole thing unfolds?
Well, I think the next few weeks are going to be crucial.
Okay.
We need to keep an eye out for any signs of escalation,
Mm-hmm.
more violence against protesters,
Right.
more provocative moves from the government,
Okay.
the constitutional court's ruling on the elections. That'll be a major turning point.
For sure.
And of course, we need to watch Russia.
What should we be looking for?
Any increased military activity near the border,
Got it.
we need to take that very, very seriously.
Okay, it sounds like we're in for a bumpy ride.
It definitely could be.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Yep.
let's take a step back
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture.
The long view.
What does all of this mean for the future of Georgia?
And how does it fit into this, broader geopolitical landscape?
Big questions.
Big questions indeed.
That's a great question.
And one that we'll be exploring in part 3 of our deep dive.
Stay tuned. We've been really focused on all this drama,
Yeah, all the players.
but to really get it, to understand what's at stake,
Mm-hmm.
we need to, zoom out.
Yeah, look at the bigger picture.
Look at history.
The historical force.
Exactly. It's like solving a mystery, right?
Absolutely.
You have to understand the backstory, the motives, the connections.
All the hidden players, the things lurking beneath the surface.
Right. And Georgia's history, it's fascinating.
Oh, it is.
It really helps explain why this crisis feels so existential for them.
Like their whole future's on the line.
Yeah, exactly.
They've been caught in this tug of war for centuries. Powerful empires, ideologies.
It's like they've never really been in control of their own destiny.
It's a tough legacy to carry.
So what are the key moments, the things from their past that are shaping this crisis?
Like what ghosts are haunting Georgia's present?
Yeah, I like that.
But we have to go back, way back.
Okay, a few centuries.
Georgia has been invaded, occupied, ruled by everyone. Persians, Ottomans,
Wow.
and more recently, of course, the Russians.
Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it?
It is, and that history, that constant domination, it leaves a mark.
You think?
It shapes how they see the world, how they see themselves.
It's that Russian influence especially that seems to be, I don't know.
Casting the longest shadow.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in the 20th century,
Yeah.
Georgia was part of the Soviet Union.
Right.
And even after the Soviet collapse,
Back in 91.
Russia kept pulling the strings.
Politically, militarily,
We saw it in 2008
human invasion.
over South Ossetia and Abkhazia.
Right.
So for many Georgians, this fear of Russia,
Mhm.
it's not abstract, it's not theoretical, it's real.
It's a lived experience.
It's trauma passed down through generations.
And that explains why, joining the EU is so appealing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a shield
Exactly.
from Russia.
Exactly. It's aligning with democratic values, with a system that
Well, at least in theory,
offers more transparency, more accountability,
it's about choosing a different future.
writing their own story.
But then you have the Georgian Dream Party
Right.
making these moves that seem to be pushing them away from that dream.
It's a head-scratcher for sure.
It really is. Why would they do that?
Well, there are theories.
Okay, like what?
Some people think they're miscalculating, that they can play both sides,
Russia and the West.
keep everyone happy.
That's a dangerous game.
Oh, it is a
Ooh.
high-stakes game of geopolitical poker.
And they might be holding a losing hand.
It's possible.
What else? What are the other theories?
Well, some say there are divisions within the Georgian Dream Party itself.
Oh, internal factions.
Yeah, some more pro-Russia than others.
I see.
And, of course, there's corruption.
Always a factor.
It's a long-standing problem in Georgian politics.
So maybe it's personal enrichment, power grabs?
It muddies the waters.
For sure. So we have this mix of history, geopolitics, internal divisions, and maybe even some greed.
Yeah, it's a complicated picture.
What does it all mean for the future of Georgia?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
They're at a crossroads, a critical juncture.
Big decisions to be made.
And the choices they make, they'll have consequences.
And not just for Georgia.
For the whole region.
If they keep going down this path, alienating the West, getting closer to Russia,
They risk isolation.
becoming even more vulnerable.
It's a dangerous path.
It's like walking into a trap.
But on the other hand,
There's always another hand.
if they can change course,
Course correct.
rebuild trust with the EU and the US,
Address the concerns of their people
then they have a chance.
to be a beacon of democracy.
A model of stability in a region that really needs it.
That's a big if, though.
It is.
It feels like the odds are stacked against them.
Internal divisions, external pressure, the threat of Russia.
It's a lot to handle.
It's a lot for any country, let alone one with such a, tumultuous past.
So what are the signs, the things we should watch for to see if things are, going in the right direction?
Well, first, watch for internal cohesion.
Okay.
Can President Zurabishvili hold on?
Mm-hmm.
Can the opposition stay united?
Okay.
Will we see more cracks in the ruling party?
If so,
Then there's hope for a democratic resolution.
what about the EU, the US? What can they do?
Their role is crucial.
How so?
They need to make it clear, unequivocally, that they stand with the Georgian people,
Right.
that they support their democracy, their European aspirations. They need to back it up, not just words.
Actions.
Economic assistance, sanctions on corrupt officials.
Strengthening their defenses against Russia
Exactly, a show of force.
and Russia. What will they do?
That's the wild card.
Always.
We can't know for sure what their plans are,
Right.
but they'll be watching, waiting for an opportunity.
So what can we do?
The best way to deter them is to show a united front.
West and Georgia together.
Make it clear that we won't tolerate any more interference.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, I have to say, I'm feeling a bit, I don't know.
Hopeful, but also apprehensive.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
It's a country with a rich history, resilient people.
But the challenges, they're immense.
It's a reminder that the fight for freedom, it's never really over.
And that democracy is fragile.
It needs to be protected, nurtured.
It's also a reminder that, we're all connected.
Absolutely.
Events in one part of the world.
But they can have a ripple effect.
Georgia's struggle, it's a microcosm of a larger battle.
Authoritarianism versus freedom.
Division versus unity.
It's a battle that needs our attention.
Our engagement.
So stay informed, stay engaged.
Don't take your freedoms for granted.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.